The familiar scent of fresh coffee and maple syrup filled the air as May tied her faded blue apron around her waist. It was barely 5:30 a.m., but Joe's Diner was already humming with early morning energy. The fluorescent lights cast a warm glow over the worn leather booths, each scratch and mark telling stories of countless meals shared over the past decades. As Mai wiped down the counter, her voice naturally found its rhythm with the gentle whirring of the milkshake machine. The melody was one she'd been crafting in her mind for weeks. A soft, hopeful tune that spoke of dawn breaking over city rooftops. 6 years of morning shifts had taught her that music could be found everywhere. In the sizzle of hash browns on the grill, in the gentle clink of spoons stirring coffee, even in the squeaky swing of the kitchen door. Old Mr. Chen, who always occupied the corner booth by the window, looked up from his crossword puzzle and smiled. "Someone's in a good mood today," he said, lifting his coffee cup for a refill. Mai poured the steaming coffee with practiced grace, adding just the right amount of cream, 2 splashes, the way he liked it. What Mr. Chen didn't know was that his daily routine had inspired the bridge section of her latest composition. Behind her cheerful "order up" calls and efficient table service lay years of classical vocal training. The acceptance letter from the prestigious music conservatory still sat in her drawer at home, along with dreams of standing on grand stages. But life had other plans, and here she was, finding her orchestra in the morning rush of a small-town diner. Between taking orders and delivering plates piled high with golden pancakes, May would scribble musical notes on her order pad. The rhythm of the morning rush became her metronome. 2 steps to the coffee machine, 3 to the pickup window, a quick spin to avoid colliding with Cookie, the elderly cook who'd been working the grill longer than Mai had been alive. "You should sing professionally," Cookie would often say during quiet moments, his wrinkled face serious beneath his white cap. If only he knew about the years she spent practicing scales and arpeggios, the competitions she'd won, the standing ovations she'd received. But circumstances had led her here, and surprisingly, she'd found an unexpected kind of music in this place. The morning light grew stronger, painting golden rectangles on the checkered floor. The diner filled with more regulars, the taxi driver finishing his night shift, the young nurse grabbing breakfast after her hospital rounds, the retired teacher who always ordered rye toast and read poetry. Each of them had become an unwitting note in May's daily symphony. She hummed as she arranged sugar packets in their containers, her mind already working on the harmony for a new song. The lyrics would come later, probably during the quiet afternoon lull when she could let her thoughts wander. There was something honest about creating music here, surrounded by the real-life stories of people just trying to make it through another day. The bell of the door chimed as more customers walked in, and May straightened her name tag. Another day was truly beginning, and with it, more inspiration for her secret melodies. She grabbed her notepad, ready to take orders and capture any musical fragments that might emerge from the beautiful chaos of another morning at Joe's. The lunch rush hit Joe's Diner like a wave, bringing with it a symphony of sounds that only May could truly appreciate. She balanced 3 plates along her arm, a skill perfected over countless shifts, while mentally recording the rhythm created by fork tines hitting ceramic plates and ice cubes clinking in glass tumblers. Double cheeseburger, hold the onions. Cookie's voice boomed from the kitchen, blending with the sizzling griddle. May nodded, adding her own voice to the mixture. Order up for table 6. The words came out almost melodically, a habit she couldn't break even if she wanted to. Some regulars had started timing their meals to her shifts, saying the food just tasted better when served with a song. Between refilling coffee cups and jotting down orders, Mai found herself composing in her head. The businessman in booth 3 repeatedly tapped his pen against his laptop. Tap, 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 creating a perfect percussion line for the melody she'd been working on. The gentle hum of conversation provided the backing vocals, while the whoosh of the door opening and closing added unexpected cymbal crashes to her mental orchestra. Her notepad had become a curious mix of lunch orders and musical notation. Next to BLT, extra mayo, was a hastily scrawled sequence of notes inspired by the way sunlight played through the window blinds. The regular customers had grown used to her pulling out the pad at odd moments, assuming she was double-checking their orders when really, she was capturing another fragment of music before it could slip away. The afternoon brought in Mrs. Wu, who ran the flower shop next door. She always ordered the same thing, vegetable soup and half a sandwich, but today something was different. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. As Mai poured her water, Mrs. Wu mentioned her mother's recent passing. The quiet way she stirred her soup, the soft sigh as she looked out the window. These moments would later become the gentle, melancholic bridge in Mei's newest composition. Even the difficult moments had their own music. When a group of teenagers accidentally knocked over their milkshakes, the sound of glass shattering against tile became an unexpected inspiration. Mei found herself humming as she cleaned up the mess, turning the chaos into a quick tempo section of a song she'd been struggling to finish. The embarrassed apologies from the teens, mixed with the squeaking of her shoes on the wet floor, somehow perfectly captured the feeling of life's unexpected moments. The diner's ancient ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, its gentle whirring providing a constant drone that Mai had incorporated into several of her pieces. She'd learned to find beauty in these ordinary sounds, the scrape of chairs against linoleum, the ding of the service bell, even the distant rumble of trucks passing on the highway outside. Cookie caught her conducting with a spatula during a quiet moment, using it to direct an imaginary orchestra of diner sounds. Instead of teasing, he just smiled and added his own contribution. A rhythmic tap-tap-tap on the order wheel that fit perfectly with the song in Mei's head. These small moments of understanding made the diner feel less like a departure from her musical dreams and more like a different kind of concert hall. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the checkerboard floor, Mei realized she'd filled 3 pages of her notepad with musical ideas. Each customer interaction, every spilled coffee and shared laugh, had become part of her growing symphony. The diner wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was her studio, her inspiration, and her stage all rolled into one flower-dusted, coffee-scented package. The sun had long since set when Mei finally unlocked the door to her small apartment above the local bookstore. Her feet ached from the long shift, but her mind buzzed with new melodies collected throughout the day. She kicked off her worn sneakers and padded across the creaky wooden floor to her most prized possession, a digital keyboard she'd bought with 6 months of carefully saved tips. The apartment wasn't much, but she transformed one corner into a cozy recording space. Old moving blankets hung on the walls to dampen the sound, and her secondhand microphone stood ready on its stand. A laptop balanced on a stack of milk crates displayed her audio recording software, the screen's glow providing most of the room's light. Mai changed out of her diner uniform and into comfortable sweatpants, then pulled out her order pad. Between coffee stains and lunch orders, musical notes danced across the pages. She began humming the tunes she'd caught from the rhythm of the morning rush, her fingers finding the keys without needing to look. The melody started simple, like sunrise over the diner's roof, then built into something more complex, just like her day. Her channel, Melodies from the Menu, had started as a quiet dream 6 months ago. The first video was just her, singing softly into her phone of the lonely trucker who'd stopped by for coffee and conversation. Something about the genuine emotion in her voice struck a chord with viewers. Now, nearly 5,000 subscribers waited for her weekly uploads of songs inspired by life at the diner. Tonight's recording session began like always, with a cup of chamomile tea and a few minutes spent transforming the day's scattered notes into a proper song. The piece coming together was about Mrs. Wu and her loss, though Mai had changed the details enough to protect privacy. The gentle piano melody captured both grief and hope, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She'd learned to work with the apartment's quirks, recording between the rumbles of passing trains, pausing when the bookstore's cat walked across her keyboard. Each take needed to be perfect. She couldn't afford expensive editing software. But there was something beautiful about the rawness of it all, the way real life crept into the edges of her music. The comment section of her channel had become an unexpected source of connection. "Your songs remind me of my mom's diner," one viewer wrote. "I can smell the coffee and hear the bell above the door." Another shared, "I listen to your music during my own night shifts. It makes the hard moments easier." May replied to each comment, building a community of people who understood that extraordinary stories could be found in ordinary places. Her tip money went straight into improving her setup. A better microphone here, a small mixer there. The gear wasn't professional quality, but she'd learned to make it sing. Some nights, she'd record the same song dozens of times, trying to capture the perfect blend of emotion and technique that her conservatory teachers had demanded. Tonight's session stretched into the early morning hours. Mai played until her fingers ached, then played some more. The song about Mrs. Wu had evolved into something deeper, a piece about how communities hold each other during difficult times. She could almost hear the diner's sounds weaving through the melody, the gentle clink of spoons, the murmur of compassionate words, the quiet strength of showing up day after day. As she finally prepared to upload the video, Mai added a simple description. "For everyone who's ever found family in unexpected places, this song is yours." She hit publish just as the sky began to lighten. Soon it would be time for another day at the diner, another symphony of moments waiting to be transformed into song. The morning had started like any other at Joe's diner, but sometimes the smallest moments can trigger the biggest changes. May was running on 3 hours of sleep after staying up late to perfect her latest song. The breakfast rush was in full swing, and she moved between tables with her usual grace, humming softly as she balanced plates and refilled coffee cups. That's when it happened. A businessman in an expensive suit, someone she'd never seen before, began complaining about his eggs. "These are supposed to be over medium," he said, his voice rising above the usual diner chatter. May apologized and offered to have them redone, but he wasn't finished. "I'm already running late, and this is completely unacceptable. Do you even know how to do your job?" The diner fell quiet. Regular customers looked up from their newspapers and plates, frowning at the man's tone. Cookie peered out from the kitchen window, spatula frozen mid-flip. But what struck Maya most wasn't the man's words. It was how the moment felt like a sour note in the middle of a beautiful song. She stood there, order pad clutched in her hand, and suddenly heard her old vocal coach's voice in her head. "You have a gift. Don't waste it." 6 years of serving eggs and pancakes flashed through her mind. 6 years of turning down invitations to perform at local venues because of early morning shifts. 6 years of watching her conservatory classmates' careers bloom on social media while she wrote songs on coffee-stained napkins. The businessman was still talking, but May wasn't really listening anymore. She was hearing something else, the gentle whir of the ceiling fan, the tick of the old clock above the counter, the soft clink of spoons against coffee cups. These sounds, these moments that had become her music, suddenly felt different. Not lesser, but different. Like they were part of a chapter that was reaching its end. That evening, after her shift, Mai sat at her keyboard but couldn't play. Instead, she opened her laptop and looked at her channel. Comments had piled up on her latest video. "Your songs make my night shifts bearable. I listen while studying for medical school. Please never stop making music." Her small but loyal audience had found something real in her songs about everyday life, about struggle and hope and finding beauty in unexpected places. She pulled out her order pad and began to write, not music notes this time, but words. All the emotions of the day poured onto the page: frustration, doubt, fear, but also determination. As the night deepened, those words became lyrics, and the lyrics found their melody. Her fingers found the piano keys, and something new emerged. A song about standing at crossroads, about the courage it takes to question the safe and familiar. The song started soft, like the pre-dawn quiet of the diner, then built like the morning rush. She wove in all the sounds that had become her daily symphony: the bell above the door, the sizzle of the grill, the murmur of conversations. But this time, they weren't just background noise. They were a reminder that sometimes our detours become our destination, and our struggles become our strength. She recorded the song in one take, tear tracks still drying on her cheeks. Coffee Stains and Refrains, she titled it, and uploaded it without overthinking. It was raw, emotional, real. Everything her conservatory training had taught her to polish away. But as she finally lay down to rest, her phone buzzed with notifications. Her subscribers were connecting with the song in a way she'd never expected. In those quiet hours before dawn, May realized something important. The diner hadn't been a detour from her music. It had given her music its heart. Every customer interaction, every small drama, every moment of connection had shaped her into a different kind of artist than she'd planned to be. Maybe it was time to stop seeing her life as divided between two worlds. Maybe it was time to let them become one song. The autumn wind rustled fallen leaves across the diner's parking lot as Mai arrived for her morning shift. Her latest song, Coffee Stains and Refrains, had hit 10,000 views overnight, a number that made her hands shake slightly as she tied her apron. The comments section had exploded with support, personal stories, and even a few inquiries about licensing her music. The morning brought a new face to the diner. A woman in her 40s with silver-streaked hair sat at the counter, laptop open beside her coffee cup. She came in 3 days in a row, always during the quiet mid-morning lull. May noticed how she'd stop typing whenever the humming started, her head tilting slightly as if trying to catch every note. On the 4th day, the woman spoke up. "That melody you were humming earlier, it's yours, isn't it?" She introduced herself as Lynn, an independent music producer who'd spent 20 years helping artists find their voice. "I discovered your channel last week. Your song about the night shift made me cry into my coffee." May nearly dropped the coffee pot she was holding. Her heart raced, but years of serving during rush hour had taught her to keep her hands steady. "You're a producer?" she asked, trying to sound casual while her mind flashed back to all those dream-filled days at the conservatory. Lynn smiled, pushing her laptop aside. "I work with independent artists who have something real to say. Your music, it's different. You're not just making songs, you're telling stories about real people, real moments. That's rare." She paused, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "And that last song of yours, about the crossroads, it's been stuck in my head for days." The breakfast regulars filtered in and out as they talked. Mr. Chen worked on his crossword puzzle while pretending not to eavesdrop. Cookie kept sending out extra toast no one had ordered, his way of making sure Mai had excuses to stay near the counter. Between taking orders and refilling coffee cups, Mai learned about Lynn's small recording studio downtown, her work with local artists, and her belief that the best music comes from lived experience. "You've built something special here," Lynn said, gesturing around the diner. "Your subscribers aren't just listening to your music. They're connecting with the stories, the people, the moments you capture. That's what I look for in artists." She pulled out a business card, sliding it across the counter. "I'd love to help you develop your sound, maybe work on a proper EP. No pressure, just think about it." May tucked the card into her apron pocket, its presence feeling both thrilling and terrifying. Throughout her shift, her mind wandered to the possibilities. She thought about proper recording equipment, about working with other musicians, about taking her music beyond her tiny apartment studio. But she also thought about her diner family, about Cookie's encouragement, Mr. Chen's daily crossword conversations, Mrs. Wu's gentle presence. That evening, as she sat at her keyboard, Mai pulled out Lynn's card again. The thought of working with a real producer made her hands tremble with excitement. But something else trembled too. A fear that in pursuing this dream, she might lose the very things that had given her music its heart. She began to play, letting her fingers find the melody that had been building all day. It was different from her usual songs, fuller, more confident, but still carrying the warmth of the diner in its notes. As she recorded, the sounds of her apartment building became part of the music. Footsteps on the stairs, the distant rumble of trains, the bookstore cat mewing from the windowsill. These weren't imperfections to be edited out anymore. They were part of her story. The song ended up being about choices, about standing at the edge of something new while holding onto what matters most. She named it Morning Light, thinking of all the sunrises she'd watched through the diner windows, all the days that had led her to this moment. The business card sat on May's keyboard, its edges worn from being pulled out and put away dozens of times over the past week. Lynn's offer to produce her EP kept playing in her mind like a melody she couldn't shake. The diner's morning rush swirled around her, but today everything felt different, like she was watching her life through a new lens. Cookie noticed her distraction when she nearly mixed up two orders, something she hadn't done in years. "Your head's in the clouds today, kid," he said kindly, sliding an extra plate of hash browns across the counter. "Been watching your views climb on that channel of yours. Pretty soon you'll be too famous for us regular folks." His words hit harder than he probably meant them to. May looked around the diner, really looked, at all the pieces of her life that had become songs. There was the booth where the retired teacher graded papers, unknowingly inspiring 3 different melodies. The window where she'd watched countless sunrises while humming new tunes. The counter where hundreds of conversations had turned into lyrics. During her break, she sat in her car and played Lynn's demo mix of Coffee Stains and Refrains through her phone. The production was polished, professional. Everything she dreamed of back in her conservatory days. But something felt missing. The gentle clinking of cups, the murmur of conversation, the imperfect beauty of real life that had become her signature sound. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lynn about studio time, about possibilities of opening for bigger artists at proper venues. The thought made her stomach flutter with excitement and fear. She'd have to cut back her diner hours, maybe even leave entirely. The thought of not seeing her regular customers every day felt like losing family. That afternoon, a young couple came in, college students who'd driven an hour after discovering her channel. "We just had to see the place that inspired the songs," they explained shyly. "Your music got us through finals week." They ordered coffee and pancakes, sneaking pictures when they thought she wasn't looking. Maya caught Mrs. Wu smiling knowingly from her usual table. The decision weighed on her as she worked. Each interaction felt heightened. The way Mr. Chen shared his crossword victory. How Cookie hummed along with her while flipping burgers, even the rhythmic splash of coffee being poured. These weren't just background noise to her music. They were her music. That evening, she sat at her keyboard, Lynn's card in one hand and her order pad full of notes in the other. She began to play, not trying to write anything specific, just letting her feelings flow. The melody that emerged wasn't about choosing between two worlds. It was about bringing them together. She reached for her phone and called Lynn. The conversation lasted an hour, her hands shaking as she explained her vision. She wanted to record, yes, but not in a sterile studio. She wanted to capture the real sounds, the real stories, the real heart of what made her music unique. And she wasn't ready to leave the diner. Not when it had given her so much. To her surprise, Lynn listened intently. "You know," she said finally, "some of the best music comes from staying true to who you are. Maybe we've been thinking about this all wrong. Instead of taking you out of the diner, what if we brought the music to it?" Maya stayed up late that night, writing what would become her most important song yet. It wasn't about choosing between dreams. It was about having the courage to create your own path. As she played, the night sounds of her apartment building mixed with the melody. The squeaky floorboard, the distant train whistle, the gentle purr of the bookstore cat who'd wandered up for a visit. She thought about all the paths that had led her here. The conservatory dreams, the diner job that became so much more, the online channel that bridged both worlds. Maybe some dreams don't look like what we initially imagine. Maybe they're better that way. 3 months later, Joe's Diner looked different on Sunday evenings. The regular fluorescent lights were dimmed, replaced by soft string lights that Cookie had insisted on hanging himself. Small tables filled the space where the afternoon regulars usually sat, and a modest sound system occupied one corner. But the coffee still percolated, and the grill still sizzled. Some things wouldn't change. Mai adjusted the microphone stand next to her keyboard, her hands steady despite the flutter in her stomach. The diner had become more than just a music venue on Sunday nights. It had transformed into a gathering place for dreamers, a spot where local artists could share their stories. The idea had sparked during her conversation with Lynn, growing into something neither of them had expected. The first sunset sessions at Joe's had started small, just May, her keyboard, and a handful of curious regulars. But word spread through her channel, and soon people were driving from neighboring towns to listen. Local musicians began asking if they could perform too. Now, every Sunday evening, the diner filled with a mix of familiar faces and new friends, all drawn together by music and endless cups of coffee. Tonight was special, though. May was debuting her EP, Breakfast Ballads, recorded right here in the diner after hours. Lynn had brought in portable recording equipment, capturing not just the music, but the essence of the place. The creak of the front door, the clink of plates, the gentle hum of conversation. These weren't background noise. They were instruments in her orchestra of everyday life. The regulars had all come. Mr. Chen sat near the front, his crossword puzzle tucked away for once. Mrs. Wu had brought flowers from her shop, arranging them in coffee mugs along the counter. Cookie watched proudly from the kitchen window, pretending he wasn't wiping his eyes with his apron. As Mai began to play, the familiar sense of coffee and maple syrup mingled with the new sounds filling the space. Her first song was about morning light through windows, about beginning each day with hope. The second celebrated the quiet heroes who sat at her counter, the night shift workers, the early risers, the dreamers planning their next big adventure over endless refills. Between songs, she shared stories about the melodies she'd found in falling plates and sizzling grills, about the characters who'd become family, about the dreams that had evolved rather than changed. Her subscribers in the audience nodded along, finally seeing in person the world they'd come to know through her music. The final song of the night was new, one she'd kept secret until now. Behind the Apron started soft, like dawn breaking over the diner's roof. It was a love letter to this place, to the life she'd built within its walls, to the dreams that don't always look like what we expect. As she sang, her voice carried all the warmth of fresh coffee, all the comfort of familiar faces, all the joy of finding your path by following your heart. The applause that followed felt different from her conservatory days. Warmer, more personal. People weren't just clapping for the music, they were celebrating a shared experience, a reminder that extraordinary stories often hide in ordinary places. Later that night, after the crowd had gone and the lights were dimmed, Mai sat at the counter with Lynn, sharing a piece of Cookie's famous apple pie. The diner felt different in the quiet, not empty, but full of echoes from the evening's music and laughter. You know, Lynn said, when I first found your channel, I thought I'd be helping you leave this place behind. Instead, you've turned it into something entirely new. She gestured at the space around them, where string lights still twinkled. Sometimes the best dreams are the ones we never knew we had. May smiled, thinking of tomorrow's morning shift, of the songs yet to be written, of the stories yet to be told. Her music hadn't taken her to Carnegie Hall, but it had brought Carnegie Hall to Joe's Diner. And somehow that felt exactly right. As she locked up for the night, the bell above the door chimed one last time. A perfect final note to end the evening. Tomorrow would bring new customers, new stories, new songs. But for now, in the quiet of the diner, Mai hummed softly to herself, adding another melody to the symphony of her beautifully unexpected life.